made a mistake, but you could have somebody against you. And it's doubtful, honestly, whether it'll be up between you two, I think. That's the reading at the present moment. So you might be seeing the start of a campaign. Well, they've already started their campaigns, but you'll see the start of their contest. So what we did was we drew straws amicably and democratically, correct?
Absolutely.
And it's my pleasure to, first of all, they're each going to speak for 5 minutes, tell them about themselves and what they're going to do for us. They're all taking over from Ms. Santa Maria's father here, you know, who's the present commissioner. He's term limited at this time, that's why he's going to leave in November. But Kathy will be our first speaker for 5 minutes. I will ding her if she goes past that. And then we'll have Andy, and your console. So, Kathy, let me invite you to come forward.
Thank you very much for having me here today. David and I go back a long way to Junior Achievement Days, so it's nice to see him again. I was moved down from New York City in 1979 to Wellington, which was the 210th home. We had about 700 people, and I said, well, I'll stay a year and figure out where I want to live. 35 years later, I'm still in District 6 in Wellington. I fell in love with the community from the very beginning, and I helped to organize the first group of parents who petitioned the schools to build schools in Wellington. We went downtown and we went to the school district, and there was no schools in Wellington or Royal Palm or the acreage at that time, 1980, and we got the first portable schools built in the western communities, Wellington Elementary and Crestwood Middle School. I stayed involved in the community from day one. I helped to found the Chamber of Commerce, which is now called the Central Chamber of Commerce, but at the time it was the Palms West Chamber of Commerce. I opened my own business in 1983, an interior design company called K. Foster Designs, and I'm grateful to say it's still in business today and has paid many bills along the way. In 1989, the state of Florida mandated that the Acme Improvement District, which was our governing body in Wellington, open 2 of the 5 seats to a public election. In previous times, since the formation of Acme, in 1951, it had been developer appointed. The first election was in November of '89. There were 23 candidates. I was the only woman, and I ran against the incumbent. And I won with 48% of the vote. And my opponent, who was the incumbent, was so distressed he resigned on TV that night. So I was sworn in the next morning for an Acme meeting. They handed me a single piece of paper with 4 items on a consent agenda, and the president of Acme said, all in favor. I said, excuse me, what does this mean? There's no information. But we ended up adjourning that meeting for 4 different times until they came up with backup information, and we started to run Acme as a real government. 2 years later, the rest of the seats were open to a public election, and I was elected president of the Acme board. We proceeded in 1992 to write a charter to try and incorporate Wellington. And I was on that charter committee. It did not succeed at a public referendum. We came back in '94 for another public referendum. It succeeded. We had it passed in Tallahassee in May of '95, and the voters confirmed it that winter. And we became a municipality in December 31st, 1995, and I was selected as the first mayor in the March elections. I served till 2000, at which time I made the decision to go into the nonprofit work. I had met John and Reve Walsh in 1983 when their son was kidnapped, and had done their national fundraising for the Adam Walsh Children's Fund for the 20 years previous to 2000. In 2000, they asked me to take over as their executive director. So I left politics and I became the executive director for the Adam Walsh Children's Fund. we merged with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children in Old Town Alexandria in the summer of 2002. And I did not want to relocate, so I wished them all the best of luck and moved on and became the director and president of Junior Achievement for South Florida. I stayed in that role. We had 40,000 children a year learning economic and business education in the schools in Palm Beach, Martin, and Okeechobee counties. And then my parents became ill, and in 2007 I took care of my parents as they proceeded through the end stages of life. But it was a very strong education for me on the role of seniors and the challenges that face seniors. So I started a nonprofit in Wellington in 2010 called Wellington Cares. And it's a complete volunteer organization where we recruit men and women and high school students in Wellington who provide non-medical services to any senior over 65 in the Wellington community. If they need groceries shopping, or they need prescriptions picked up, they need their lawn mowed, they need someone to take them to the doctors, we have a volunteer who will do that. The volunteers bank hours, so when their needs come up or they have a relative who needs services, they're entitled to so many hours of service. But along that process, it was a great awakening for me of the needs of our communities and what we needed to look to as we age in place. I had always been focused on children's issues, and this was the first time I had really dealt with the seniors' issues. During this time, one of the things that I am very proud of is having been part of the planning for the community of Wellington. And the tourist industry that you're all aware of, and I'm sure very happy about, is the equestrian industry. When we started the development of Wellington, the main goal of our comprehensive plan design was to protect and allow that industry to grow. And you today see the benefits of that with an economic engine that provides hundreds of thousands of dollars, or millions at this point, into the Palm Beach County economy. We have over 10,000 horses come into Wellington and the surrounding communities today. We've outgrown the boundaries of Wellington. The overflow into Loxahatchee and the acreage to sustain the industry is growing exponentially these days. But that economic engine puts it as one of the largest tourist assets we have in Palm Beach County. And it's vitally important that we protect that. I really believe that my experience, having served for 11 years in elected office, as well as being a small business owner for 32 years, gives me the knowledge and experience and in the field experience of what it takes to protect and develop managed growth in the Western communities, as well as protecting the tourist industries that drive us. And there are so many challenges in District 6 right now. We have 20,000 homes on the planning block as we stand here and speak for the Seminole Pratt Whitney, Southern Boulevard, and North Lake Corridor. There's no work for them in the Western communities. There's no roads to support those kinds of numbers of development. And whoever you choose to be your county commissioner needs to have the expertise and the knowledge in managed growth to start from day one as county commissioner and make those tough decisions to protect the way of life in the Western communities. We're a very diverse group from Wellington through the acreage and out to the Glades. And each one of us love the lifestyle we've chosen. So it's very important that we find a way to protect the diversity and individuality of the communities, but allow them to grow and prosper as we move ahead. And I thank you for the time to be here and to introduce myself. And if anyone has questions, I'll be glad to ask them later.
Our next candidate who's going to speak to is Andy Schauder. He's founder of the Palm Beach Financial Exchange, an electronic banking company, and I'll let Andy tell you the rest of his life. Thank you.
Thank you to everyone for giving us the opportunity now. I hope many of the other organizations in this county will follow your lead and give us an opportunity to speak, because at the end of the day, it's your lives that we are going to affect. One of us here will affect your life, and it could affect us for a lot longer than we're in office. We make some landmark decisions sometimes, so thank you. As I was driving in here today, I was thinking that I actually own a hotel as well. In 1990, I bought a piece of property in Wellington, and a few years later, I sat down and drew up the plans on a laptop, and I designed my hotel. It's a little bit different than yours. It's a niche market, but I may share some of the same struggles that you may have. I have trucks showing up with food. I have some unruly customers sometimes, and the happiest day is when they show up, and the happiest day is when they leave. Beyond that, I also am bittersweet when the situation's bittersweet when it's time for them to leave. Because when they leave, it's usually me calling in a front-end loader and a number of large dump trucks to clean up their mess. I own a horse hotel. People come from all over the world to compete in Wellington for something we have called the Winter Equestrian Festival, and I own a dressage facility. I'm blessed to have people from all over, Olympians both past and present, who've stayed at my location for the last 10 years. So I've got a little taste of what it's like to be in the hotel business, and I can say you guys got a tough job ahead of you most of the time. My company that I started that was referenced before is Palm Beach Financial Exchange. This month, I celebrated my 20th anniversary. It's a company that caters to recurring transactions, also known as EFT, electronic funds transfer. I've handled the money for about 550 businesses across the United States and Puerto Rico. I've handled about $1 billion of other people's money, roughly $40 per transaction at a time. And I can serve any business and all business anywhere from what got me started with originally way back when LA Fitness, Schools Gym, World's Gym, Powerhouse Gym, do boat storage, mini storage, condo associations, church tithing fees, greening fees, et cetera, et cetera. If you can think of a business, I've probably either handled it, including the YMCA, or I'm about to handle it. Very fortunate that in the last 17 years I have not advertised for business. Every bit of my business has come by word of mouth. I do about 50% of my business in the first 5 days of the month, so I know what crunch time is. And I've personally overseen all the software that has guided my business, run my business since the inception in 1994. So I know what it's like to manage, and I know what it's like to handle other people's money. And prior to that, I was a financial consultant, investment banker for the third largest thrift in the U.S. owned by Ford. I handled all of Palm Beach and Broward County's fixed income for this particular branch. All I've done in my adult life is handle everybody else's money with my own neck on the line. Prior to the Patriot Act, I had an unlimited unsecured line of credit through the Federal Reserve Bank. Can't imagine too many businesses, and a lot bigger businesses than mine, don't have unsecured lines of credit. I did, and I still have about $25, $30 million unsecured line of credit through there that I do my transactions monthly. To me, it's a big feather in my cap. The state of Tennessee used my banking practices through some private auditors that were teaching the public auditors exactly what it meant to have a clean business and how things were done. So I'm very proud of that as well. My first time appearing in front of the county commission and in the county chambers was in the 1990s. I learned something called TDRs, transfer of development rights. There was a piece of property down the street from a location that I owned a home in District 6 that I purchased in 1990 as my first place that I still own and have been the only occupant. I still also own a home in Wellington, the horse hotel that I mentioned, which is my home. I turned the other one into my business. They were trying to get an increase from 100 homes to 100 homes from 72. I went down to the county and said I didn't think this was right. You could go ahead and buy property rights, developmental rights from one piece of property, turn it over. Learned about that. In the 1990s, later on, I was also part of the neighborhood coalition that's tried to stop Lions Road from going through the area that is now Olympia and cutting through our neighborhood. It was very successful in doing that. To this day, it still does not go through. I do 50% of my business in the first 5 days of the month, which for the last 6 years has allowed me to attend just about every single county commission meeting, every district meeting, everything that has gone on. And anything that I miss, I watch on TV. But I'm the only candidate here in the last 6 years that can say I've been to every meeting of every type, for the most part, that's been sponsored by the county in one way or another. I've been out through to the Hoover Dike restoration with the Army Corps of Engineers. I've been to the Cancer Cluster meetings. I have been to Acreage Landowners Association meetings. I've been to Indian Trail meetings. If there's been a meeting, I've been to it. And if there's an amenity or something to have fun in our district, I've done that too. I boat in the lake. I ride my Harley around the lake. I go to polo and the equestrian events on the weekends during the time. And I do just about everything everybody else does. I live in this county. I reside in Wellington, but I live in the county. And after sitting in the county commission for the last 6 years, I've seen your presentations to the county commission. I have some of your presentations, because when we're done, I go home and I download them from the county site, or I can take them off of the county's Channel 20. There's nobody in this room right now, in my opinion, who has spent as much time down at the county or could possibly bring enough information running the very first day with the historical things that have happened in the county for the last 6 years that I can. That, along with my financial background, the fact that I have helped to maintain more than 550 businesses across the U.S., I believe it makes me the most qualified person, systematically financial, and I ask for your support in November. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Yes, we do shovel it the same way as you do. Our last speaker today is Melissa McKinley. She's a legislative aide for the County Legislative Affairs Department, and she'll come in a little bit later because she only gets an hour for lunch. Thank you. It's our taxpayer money at work. Melissa?
I'm a little intimidated. This is the first time that I've actually had the opportunity to have to speak in front of one of my bosses who has a little control over whether I'm hired or fired. So, excuse me if I offend you. Let me start off by saying Melissa McKinley. I'm also a candidate for the Commission District 6 seat. And we have some pretty big shoes to fill. Commissioner Santa Maria has held that seat for the last 8 years. He came into office and he made it his primary goal to question the integrity and the ethics of all of those who serve in public office. And if you carry that message to your father, that is something that he should be commended for, and something that all three of us up here should make sure that we continue to pursue if whomever should be elected. I have not lived in Wellington as long as my two opponents here. I have lived in Florida longer than them. I moved to Florida at the young ripe age of 6 years old and grew up on the sandy white shores of Siesta Key over on the west coast of Florida. I moved my family here just about 10 years ago. We landed in Wellington in 2004 under the same guise that Kathy came to. Well, let's settle here and see if we like anything better. And we ended up building a home there and staying there for a number of years. I am currently a single mom. I have 3 beautiful children. They're 16, 14, and almost 13. I have no fear of people disliking my decisions because I live with that on a daily basis. They keep me very busy. They also help me learn how to say things in 5 minutes or less with quite a good emphasis. I would go on and on about my experience here, 20 years of public service to the state of Florida, and also community service to a wide variety of organizations, including heading up an organization on behalf of the Junior Leagues of Florida, where I led them on probably a dozen different legislative priorities. It's an organization that was at that time about 15,000 members. So I know what it's like to herd sheep and try to build consensus and get things through for the good of the order. As far as your issues are concerned, you know, working in the Legislative Affairs Office for the past just over 4 years, I'm familiar with a lot of the things that affect this industry. You know, we have been up there in Tallahassee as part of a fabulous advocacy team working on issues like beach renourishment, film and television incentives, you know, trying to get some sort of legislation passed that, you know, would deal with the internet sales tax and the, you know, the online hotel issue. You know, I would support, as your commissioner, would continue to support the efforts that tax collector Ann Gannon has made in trying to pursue some sort of equity between your, you know, bricks and mortar businesses here as far as securing hotel rooms through your hotels versus, you know, the Travelocities of the world. I would continue to work together with our congressional and our legislative delegation to try to maximize the federal and state dollars that we can bring down here for beach and nourishment projects. It goes without saying, if we don't have our beaches in Palm Beach County, this industry will suffer tremendously. I also believe that, we are running in District 6, and District 6 includes Lake Okeechobee. And I think a lot of that region has been left out as far as long-term marketing plans from the tourism industry. And I would like to see us bridge, from lake to ocean. And when you have the opportunity to travel with your boss for 6 hours on a long car journey to Tallahassee, you talk about a whole wide variety of topics. And he's come up with a great idea that I think that as a commissioner and with your help and helping the business communities and the other entities in the county, including the Economic Council, that we ought to look at connecting those two entities on a cultural trail, where we have advertising opportunities that go along basically the whole Southern Boulevard corridor from the ocean out to the lake, where we can highlight our tourism attractions like Mounts Botanical Gardens, Lion Country Safari, promote that we have a really good airport there and they don't need to go down to Miami or Fort Lauderdale, and all of the, the equestrian interests out in Wellington, and sort of piece that together and bring this county into one, cohesive tourism industry where we're not leaving anybody out. And in the same regard, also making sure that Wellington especially has its equity as a business community. And I hope that I could get your support, and I'm very proud to stand up here this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. Well, let me start off the questions, and hopefully some answers. And if we can try and keep them perhaps a little bit short. The first one I'd like to ask is, we've all heard about All Aboard Florida. Without going into great detail, are you in favor of this new venture or not? May I start with Andy?
Well, I'm open-minded. I'm leaning towards no. And I'm looking at it from a different perspective than perhaps you are. I have a friend of mine who recently passed away who was a security, railroad police, who told me that overall, he worked for CSX. He said overall the track conditions in the state of Florida can't support anything beyond 50 miles an hour, and that any type of increased traffic, freight-wise, could cause serious injury to the tracks. And if you look at the idea that 32 more trains are going to come up and down the same tracks, 40-mile stretch of tracks from Cocoa to Orlando, it's going to put a heavy beating on the infrastructure. It's a private concern that owns it. If there is an opportunity for private to stay private and it's going to happen, that's one thing, one aspect of it. But if you're going to start involving public funds and the public is going to support basically the freight industry, that's another. I'm open-minded, but I'm leaning towards no.
Kevin?
I would agree with Mr. Shallow's opinion. I think that the present day there are so many unanswered questions concerning its impact at Crossroads in particular, in northern Palm Beach and in Martin County, that have to be addressed, as well as the condition of the tracks, that until that information is established and the costs associated with it and who's going to fund those costs, it's premature to make any decision on the viability of the project.
Melissa?
I am in favor of All Aboard Florida. I think that it can revitalize some of our downtown communities. I think that it can help us attract tourism dollars on a regional perspective. I think a lot of families from, that might have to choose between either visiting Miami or visiting Orlando would have the opportunity to stay in both places. We were successful this year, or my team that I work for, in securing $10 million from the state to help secure up some of those crossing zones to make them safer. I do think that some more research needs to be done as far as the speed, especially as it picks up just north of Jupiter, but I'm optimistic that they do.
Thank you, Melissa. From the floor? Yes, ma'am.
Have you been, to each of the candidates, have you been in support of the World Equestrian Games being brought to Wellington? What have you done for that, and what would your plans be if that would be brought here?
Well, let's reverse the Melissa to start.
I just don't have one of those voices that carries that often. Yes, I'd be supportive of that. Personally, I have not worked on that project, but I'd be supportive.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. I think we missed a tremendous opportunity that we may be fortunate enough to have to come back around because of a decision that was made in Kentucky. But it required not just the participation of the county, that the village of Wellington will have to step up to the plate and agree to be a participant. And any of you that have any influence there needs to make your opinion known on the value of the World Games being hosted here in Wellington. And that's the stumbling block. They couldn't come to consensus in time to qualify.
The council in Wellington will not go there. Andy?
Well, it actually goes deeper than that, but absolutely supportive. There's a fight between two very wealthy businessmen that keep the entire landscape in flux at all times. But absolutely, I'm 100% supportive of seeing how I have a horse hotel. I welcome visitors, guests.
Thank you, Andy. Anybody else? My God. All right, let me ask a question regarding bed tax. Over the years, the bed tax was founded originally, as we all know, to promote tourism, put heads in beds, along with the Cultural Council. When this happened over 30 years ago, 30% went to the Cultural Council, and 70% went to tourism. Now what we have, and Glenn, bear me out on this,
Checking your numbers.
30% goes to tourism, and the other 70% goes to a number of other agencies. And we're just about to, and Bill mentioned this, we have, on condition that we get a correct, what we consider a viable spread of the 6 cent, support putting a 6 cent in. Because we're interested in more money going into tourism and not going into many of the other ways that money could be spent. Al and I, we talked about this at lunch already. Where would you stand at the present moment? We know we're going to spend money on beaches and so on and so forth, but where do you stand on putting bed tax dollars into tourism rather than into other funds? Sorry, Chuck. Okay.
I'll get over it.
You will. Start with Kathy this time.
I think that the critical issue is that the agreement be made in writing of what the funds would be for the additional 6 cents. And then I have no problem as long as it's for the designated use that everyone agrees to, and it can't be changed after the tax is approved.
Listen.
Well, as far as your question, would I support a 6 penny? You know, if you have to pick the lesser of the taxes, lesser of the evil taxes, that would be one that I would pick, because our residents really don't get strapped with that. It's our tourists, but our residents get to benefit from it, so I think that that's a good thing. I spent 5 years actually working as the liaison to the Tourist Development Council in Sarasota and worked in their budget office, and had the pleasure of running a 1 cent penny sales tax campaign that had failed previously 3 years earlier. And the year I worked on it, it ended up passing with over 60% of the vote in a very conservative community. And that's not one of my kids. And the only reason that that passed is because we put together a 10-year, $600 million capital improvement plan, and we sold that plan to the community, and we stuck to it. And I'm happy to report the last time I checked, that tax had been renewed for another 10 years. So you can't do it, like Kathy said, without a very specific outline that you sell to the community. As far as how those dollars are spent, it would be my preference, although I support the current breakdown right now as far as the Cultural Council, the Film Commission, the Sports Commission, the beaches, everybody's sort of getting their fair share of it. But I do think that with an extra penny, you really need to focus on marketing, and we really do need to focus on making sure our beaches are kept up.
Thank you, Melissa.
I'm definitely in favor of enforcing and utilizing the taxes we have before we add any new ones. And by that, I'll go back to the TDR's transfer of development rights. We have, as Kathy mentioned, the potential for 20,000 new homes to be built out in District 6. But to show you how they come about, there's one property that's approved for just under 3,000, 2996, and they want to build 6,500 homes. They want to take 235,000 square feet of commercial and turn it into 1.4 million. Well, all that has a value. If the developers are going to make that, I'd like to see the transfer of development rights, which used to cost $50,000. So you could take a piece of property and say, I won't build on it. I'll transfer it over to this property I do want to build on, and you pay the county $50,000 in order to be able to do that. Well, in the past, the county has sold them for $1. So if you think even an average of $1,000, $5,000 to these different developments, and you're going to build 3, 4, 5, 10,000 additional homes, there's other revenue sources that are already in place as long as we enforce them. I understand that the original idea of the bed tax in 2008, it was 70% market, or 70% of the tax to marketing and 30% towards the cultural arts. Now it's got down to 52% in the Convention Visitor Bureau, 22% in Cultural Council, 14% in beach renourishment along the shores, 7% goes to the Sports Commission and 3% to film and TV. Well, if you heard Commissioner Vandy yesterday, she was saying we have to find out whether or not we're a direction as a county that's actually going to support the TV and film industry as strongly as they said in the past. So before we add any more taxes, I'd like to make sure that every one of our dollars that we've already charging for tax, collecting for tax, distributing as tax, are used in the most appropriate way.
Thank you very much. Well, at least this hopefully is very short, I understand that. And we haven't asked all that many questions. But it'll give you a sense of the candidates that are going to be standing. Kathy and Melissa, you come up in August.
Yes, we have a primary August 26th.
Okay. And then after that would come the November election, where the election for the actual commission seat would happen. So it's two different processes here. But hopefully we've just given you a chance to meet the candidates and to hear them specifically. We've tried to, especially some of the questions I've asked, is very specifically ask you for your industry, what about us? And hopefully they've given you some specific ideas of how they would go about it. I mean, we all understand that work needs to be done on these items and it needs to be some things investigated. But we always stand ready to be with our county commissioners and with the TDC and the other agencies during the course of the year. So thank you very much indeed for coming. We thank also the PGA National for their delicious lunch, and we look forward